Good morning. Happy Saturday. Today I am having this live for visa applicants that are spouses and children of U.S. citizens waiting on the embassy at the U.S. Embassy in Islamabad, Pakistan. See that like 9 people have joined. Let's give a minute for more people to join. Today's Q&A is just for those people that are visa applicants waiting for interviews at U.S. Embassy Islamabad. If you have another question, join us on Wednesday. Every Wednesday, we have a live called Let's Talk Immigration, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time in the U.S., 3 p.m. Pacific. And that'll be this Wednesday as well. So you can bring your questions there. Okay. So I see someone is already coming in talking about the DVs. Please focus on getting visa interview for lawsuit in Nepal 2021. Since we don't have any questions yet about the Islamabad lawsuit, I'll go ahead and answer you. Okay, there's nothing that I can do or any attorney can do to expedite or accelerate the decision from the Circuit Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia. The Biden administration's appeal of the good luck order, we have to wait for the court, the 3-judge panel in the court, to issue an opinion before we can move forward in that case. There's nothing, you say, please focus. There's nothing I can do. We have to wait for that. We're at a procedural place where waiting is the procedure. Okay, so I understand the frustration. Have to wait for that appeal. Someone, Kamal, says DV 2020-2021 game is over. That is not true. DV 2020, almost all DV 2020 selectees who were not issued visas are Gomez class members, and their fate, we've already won that case. We won summary judgment, and if we beat the Biden administration's appeal, they will be issued visas. DV 2021 is a little more nuanced because for many DV 2021 selectees, their journey is over because they were not plaintiffs and they are not in embassies that can benefit from the Ray order. But anyway, I need to stick to Islamabad. Savvy Bull has asked the question, how far behind is Islamabad? And that is a great question. And I am going to go to, let me see here. Let me share my screen. You all think I can share my screen? Let me see if I can do it. Okay, I'm sharing my screen. This is our website. On our website, I have a little blog over here, right here, blog. I made this post in August because we were getting data in our DV lawsuits that I realized was helpful information to family-based immigrant applicants, employment-based, all immigrant applicants, about how big the backlogs were at different embassies. And actually, I sent a tweet at the time. The Biden administration has 11,667 family preference visa applicants in the backlog, compared with 0 at Frankfurt, or I think it was also 0 at Warsaw or close to it. But I'm not just talking to family preference category visa applicants today. I'm also talking to IR1, CR1s who we are onboarding a group lawsuit for. So let me go here to Islamabad. This is came from an exhibit to a declaration in our litigation. And you'll see that as of June 30th, 2022, there were 5,794 documentarily qualified, documentarily complete applicants awaiting appointments in the immediate relative category. So immediate relatives includes not only IR1 and CR1, R2, CR2, but also IR5s. parents of U.S. citizens. And for Pakistan, there's many visa applicants in that category. So I can only guess that about more than half of those are spouses and children of U.S. citizens, and a little bit less than half are parents. That's my guess. So there were about 3,000 people in this line waiting for interviews on June 30th. That was not good if you look at the monthly statistics for how many visas that they issue each month. And let's do that real quick. Monthly visa statistics. Here's how you do that for those that are curious. You go to Google, type in monthly visa statistics. It's the very first thing that comes up. There's visa statistics for non-immigrants and immigrant visa categories. We go to immigrant visa categories, and we want to look at the last month to see how good Islamabad is doing. So there's two ways to look, but we want by post because we're looking for Islamabad. So September statistics show for Islamabad the immediate relative categories, these 3 categories here, plus these 17 visas here, 200, 250. I'm trying to do math quickly. 250 or 60 a month for our one. So if there's basically 5,000 that they're dealing with in the backlog, and they're only issuing 250 per month for immediate relatives, you're talking about over a year to get them out of the backlog if there were not new applicants every month. And that's just for the immediate relative categories. The family preference categories, much, much worse picture because you see 450 at 11, 25. FX are owed F2As, so 61 there, 176 F4, which actually surprises me that that's more. So with over 11,000 family preference categories and them issuing under 300 a month, and September was actually a rise over last months. If you look through the previous months, that's a several year backlog for an interview for a family preference category. So Islamabad has some problems, right? Stop sharing so we can see what other questions we have. Okay, I'm skipping the DV 2020 and 2021 and 2022 questions because that's not what this live is about. Join us on Wednesday for our weekly Let's Talk Immigration. Okay, are there any precedents of group petitions for this type of case? Very type of case. The very is doing a lot of work in the sentence, and that it's saying, was there a case just like this? No, there was not a case just like this. Is there precedents for group lawsuits for family visa categories that have had successful outcomes? Yes. I worked on a case called Al Harvey at my previous employer, where Judge Kogan in the Eastern District of New York ordered the government to adjudicate visa applications for all the plaintiffs in that case. It was a Yemeni case of Yemeni families. I built upon that when I went out on my own with my law partner, Raphael Urena, and we filed cases on behalf of Yemenis in the Eastern District of California. Mosley was a case where we filed the case and the government did not want to fight us. A judge issued an order that asked them some questions that they didn't want to answer, and instead they just issued visas to all of our plaintiffs very quickly, most of them that weekend, but some of them took a week because we had to get people from Yemen to Djibouti. So that was the first success Morrison Urena had. We were 2 separate law firms then, but me and my partner, Raphael. And then we built upon that success with other group lawsuits for not only Yemenis, but also Iranian and Syrian families that were facing the Muslim ban. There's a line of cases, Darshini, Najafi, Razi. There were group cases I'm leaving out many. South Oman. Anyway, those cases were beneficial in getting the State Department to release more information about how their processes worked. And in the process, they always want to impress the judge. And the way they impress the judge and tell them nothing to see here is they issue visas to the plaintiffs as the case goes on. Eventually, everybody's issued a visa, or sometimes they're refused a visa because they don't qualify. They're not eligible for like terrorism or fraud grounds or something like that. We can't do anything about that. Our lawsuits are challenging the State Department policies and the unreasonable delay. They're not really going to the merits, okay, of your eligibility for the visa. So it's very rare that there was a refusal for one of those reasons. So let me go. What's the question here? Are there any precedents of group petitions for this very type? More modernly, recently, we've had a situation where we've seen group lawsuits. The State Department respond sometimes to the announcement of the group lawsuit, but also to the filing of the group lawsuit or the first motion for preliminary injunction or something, by actually changing the policy that we're challenging, by like hiding the ball, right? Proclamation 10014 was the subject of the Jacob case. Probably some Jacob plaintiffs are watching right now. Some still haven't been issued visas. But that case, in my view, was very instrumental in removing Proclamation 10014 because Judge Chin was uncomfortable with it. He had already said that in the Young case where he ordered them to issue visas to our named plaintiffs. And then in Jacob, he told the government attorneys that, you know, something's going to happen here if your president doesn't do something with this proclamation. And then President Biden rescinded it. So the lawsuit was a catalyst in changing policy. Ironically, those same plaintiffs were plaintiffs in Sonny and Santos, two cases we filed in the Eastern District of New York. And in those group cases, we were the State Department changed their policy with respect to what was called the tiered approach, where they said these visa categories are more important than these visa categories. And what they did, it was called the recalibration cable. They said it's up to the consular chief to decide their favorite visa categories. Well, at the time, that was like, well, it's progress, right? And that cable from September 21st, was it November 21st? November 21st, 2021 is why we find ourselves here, because there were two things in that cable. One, it was giving authority to the consular chief to pick and choose his favorite visa categories. And the second was a prioritization on student visas, non-immigrant visas, also tourist visas. And so both of those things, I argue, led to the backlogs that we're seeing for the family-based applicants at Islamabad. So there are precedents for group petitions. I've discussed some of those cases generally, but not all. There are precedents specifically for groups of family-based visa applicants. That's what I'm saying. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. The worst case is it leaves you where you are. It will never like negatively affect the merits of your individual education or your place in the current queue, if that queue exists. Okay. Good question here from Mon. How long would it take for the lawsuit to come to a decision and interview scheduled? Well, first of all, there's two ways that the lawsuit can have a positive outcome. And the first doesn't even involve a decision from a judge. The first is how the State Department reacts to us filing the case. And also they're wanting to impress the judge before we get in front of the judge. They don't want to go in front of the judge and say, plaintiffs are right. We haven't issued any of these people visas or giving any of them for an interview. That's the last thing they want to do. So they're going to look closely at our list of plaintiffs. We put their case numbers in the complaint so that there's no hiding the ball. They know who our plaintiffs are and what their case numbers are. Don't worry, we don't put their invoice numbers. So that way we have given the State Department every opportunity to make progress on those applications before we get in front of the judge. So how long would it take for the lawsuit to come to a decision? Usually within 2 to 3 months, if we file a motion for preliminary injunction, which I plan to file. However, we could get a positive outcome, either with state issuing some visas, setting interviews and issuing visas to some plaintiffs, or changing policy prior to it even the judge even reads the case. Okay, so while it's good to know the answer to that question, just to understand that we could get interviews scheduled before we get to that point. Okay. Zalak wants to ask a question, and it's coming to my WhatsApp. My WhatsApp is available. You can link to it from my website. So ask me there. That's fine. Oh, I can go there and look and see. Okay. What are the chances of this lawsuit going through? I don't know how to calculate that. We've got 3 legal theories that we're running with in this lawsuit. 2 related to the recalibration cable. One of those we've tested before and not been successful with yet. It's the subject of the proposed amended complaint in Sonny, Santos, and Wilson, and also was the subject of the challenges that we made in the many of the challenges we made in our DV cases in the summer. But the third one is challenging Secretary Blinken's understaffing of the Islamabad embassy, which was a decision. Okay. They can't say, oh no, we didn't know that Islamabad needed to be staffed, when they closed the embassy at Kabul and created a surge of demand for visa application interviews at Islamabad at the same time because of the withdrawal. If you compare what happened with the closing of Kabul to the closing of Kiev and Moscow, Warsaw and Frankfurt, the embassies that took over for those posts, they don't have backlogs. So obviously, decisions were made by Secretary Blinken and Julie Stuff, people at the visa office, that for whatever reason, people that are waiting for interviews at Islamabad are less than, or not as, not a priority for this administration. I think it's wrong. And while that's not what we are that's not our direct legal challenge, it is the context. It's impossible to ignore, right? So we're going to paint that picture. So what are the chances? I can only speculate. I'm optimistic that this lawsuit is going to make a difference at Islamabad, and also that it's going to create, accelerate the adjudications for some or all plaintiffs. I'm optimistic. How fast do you expect the lawsuit to progress, and when do we expect hearings to start? Okay, great question. So the federal rules of civil procedure give a general outline of how a lawsuit works. If you file a complaint, the government has 60 days from the time you serve that complaint. We usually serve the complaint within a week. So the government will have a deadline within 60 days that they'll have to file a responsive pleading. That's either an answer or a motion to dismiss. With immigration, they always file a motion to dismiss generally. Not always, but generally. So the government will respond within 60 days. And then if they file a motion to dismiss, then we file an opposition, and then they file a reply, and then the judge issues an order. Federal judges, for those new to litigation, have discretion over how much time they take to issue the orders. Sometimes they're quick. Sometimes they take more time. In DC, we've seen judges take more time lately because they're buried in prosecutions of people that tried to overthrow our government after, January 6th incident. So because there's so many criminal cases on the docket that involve the liberty of people, whether or not they're in prison or not, those cases kind of get prioritized. So DC is especially clogged up right now. But so we can't always predict well, we can't predict how long it's going to take for a judge to issue their decision. But we will be filing a motion for preliminary injunction in this case sometime in December. I want to make sure we get it right. And hopefully there'll be a hearing on that January, February. A hearing, though, you asked the question, when do we expect hearings to start? There's only hearings on motions. And so there's usually not more than one hearing on a motion. It might be a status conference or something. But a hearing is different from a decision. Decisions are generally based on the papers that we file. I'm going to be completely transparent about all the filings in the case. If you go to our website now and you check out any of the links there, you'll eventually end up to lawsuit filings. We share all those on our website, and then I'll also be emailing plaintiffs regularly whenever there's a development like a filing in the case. I am rambling a little bit. I apologize. Usually somebody's here to stop me. Wait. Okay, Vaughn asks, what is the likelihood for the court to settle the lawsuit, and how long would it take to come to a decision? Okay, revisit what I said earlier. There's two ways we could get the outcome we want. Our goal is not to win a lawsuit. Again, I know that sounds crazy. Our goal is not to win a lawsuit. Our goal is to get visas for our plaintiffs, which means first we get interviews for our plaintiffs, and then we get visas, and then we dismiss the lawsuit. There's no reason to stick around and win a lawsuit and say we're right if your spouses and children are coming to the U.S. and getting green cards. That's good enough for us, right? So the court may not be what settles the lawsuit. The filing of the lawsuit itself could play a role in that for your individual family. Impossible to know or predict the likelihood, really. How long would it take to come to a decision? Right, and that goes back to the thing I just said. First of all, there's only a decision on motions. So we in the first 6 months of a case, you want a decision on the motion for preliminary injunction, and you want a decision on the government's motion to dismiss. Those are round numbers. And you want, as plaintiffs, you want to win both of those, right? But what we're really looking for is visa interviews. So the procedure, the federal rules of civil procedure in that process, while it's interesting, especially for non-lawyers who are like watching it, sort of like a lawsuit that you watch on TV or something. It's like, what happens next? It's interesting from that perspective. It's not our goal. Our goal is to get those visas issued. Hi, Oveus. I feel that frown a lot of times. I think you're responding to the backlog at Islamabad. Nama says, how long will it take to clear the Afghan cases from Islamabad if you know about statistics of Afghan cases? I don't have the breakdown of the backlog at Islamabad that's broken down from chargeability countries. So I don't know, don't have those statistics, so it's impossible to project that. But I think it's sort of the same situation as Pakistani cases, because the embassy is understaffed. It has been understaffed unless something changed last week or something. So as long as that happens, the backlog will continue to grow. And that's going to grow for Afghan cases or Islamabad cases. It's not like there's a less of a demand for Afghans to leave Afghanistan, right? My Twitter DMs are actually buried in Afghans that are trying to figure out a path out of Afghanistan right now. How many months, years we waiting again, DB 2020-21? Okay, so this live isn't about DBs. I'll briefly, for the people that are joining us for what this live is about, that's curious about this question, though, I'll explain. DV 2020 and DV 2021, we actually won victories in lawsuits, and many people were issued visas, but not all. And the Biden administration appealed the orders that we won. And so we are in an appeals fight to get as many visas as we can. It's not like nobody was issued visas from our victories in DV 2020 or 2021, but we continue to fight because we want as many of our plaintiffs issued visas as possible. And it's taking a lot of patience on those DV 2020 and 2021 families. And I understand their frustration. Naima asked a question: what are the chances to win the lawsuit? Impossible to calculate. There's so many factors that go into that. One is like who our judge will be, and we won't even know until the case is filed. But again, circling back to something I said before, our goal isn't to win a lawsuit. Our goal is to get your spouse a visa. That's what we want to do. And you ask how long will it take after the decision after the lawsuit? There's a good chance that we could get the visa before the judge issues the decision in the lawsuit. And that's what generally happens. There are exceptions. Like I said, the Al Harvey case, the Young case. In the Young case that we filed, there were some people assigned to Islamabad in that case in summer of 2020, fall of 2020. Judge Chin actually ordered the State Department to educate everybody, to set everybody for an interview within a month. I mean, like, he was not playing around. Like, originally he just said, okay, plaintiffs win, schedule them all for interview. And the government filed a motion for clarification. I'll never forget this, because the clarification was like on a Sunday night or something, on a weekend night. He issued an order. He says, oh, you want clarification? Here you go. Do it now. It was pretty cool. That was sort of the best case scenario, that you have a judge that is having the government work fast. But you know what? Now we're kind of surviving and moving on from the COVID pandemic. It's more likely than it was then, and that was in the middle of the pandemic. Olga says, who is the supervisor in charge of Islamabad's embassy operations? To my understanding, that person is Consul General Michael Solberg and Deputy Chief of Mission Andrew Schofer. If anybody has information that they have been replaced, please let me know, because the State Department doesn't publicize that. It's something we find out from our litigation and just being nosy and emails that we receive. But if anybody knows something different, let me know. But I think it's Michael Solberg and Andrew Schofer. And I want to thank them for their service as foreign service officers. It's important to understand that while Islamabad may seem like the problem, let's wait and see discovery. Let's see what we find out in the lawsuit. Because if the State Department is giving them guidance that says they can't do what you want them to do, that's not their fault. If their computers won't let you schedule for an interview, that's not their fault. That's the visa office. That's Secretary Blinken's and Julie Stuff's fault. So it's not always... Your obstacle is not always what you think it is. Sometimes it's indirect. If an applicant files with a joint lawsuit, can it negatively impact their interview? No. More likely to get 221G? No. Will a representative from your law firm help represent that applicant during the interview process? We are here for guidance. And if you need us to intervene with the embassy, we will not be attending your interview. But we take care of all of our clients if they have problems. We don't leave them out there to figure out things on their own. So if you have if you're a client, you have a question, you better bet that we're going to answer it. Okay. I want to go back to something though. You said more likely to get 221G. What Vaughn means by that is administrative processing after the interview. Let's say that the State Department sees the lawsuit coming or sees it filed, and they want to impress the judge going into the first hearing. And so they schedule some of the applicants for interviews. They're not going to impress the judge if they just interviewed them and then it didn't issue any visas, right? So if our goal is to get final adjudications on all our for all of our visa applicants, one thing that's not a final adjudication is 221G. That's called, actually in the FAM, the Foreign Affairs Manual, that's called a quasi-refusal. Even the State Department admits that it's not a final adjudication. Sometimes their attorneys in court will try to argue that it is, and judges just laugh at them. So our goal is to get final adjudications, not 221G. I realize that wasn't your question, that I'm just rambling. Okay, Savvy says, if someone files a lawsuit with DQ of, let's say, November 1st, 2021, and someone who doesn't file a lawsuit of DQ of May 2021, if this is successful, the person with DQ will keep waiting. Is this like a bribe? No, it's not like a bribe. I'm not bribing any judges or courts. Okay, let me phrase it like this. The person who's November 1, 2021, if they've been treated unlawfully and they go to the court and say, hey, I've been treated unlawfully, can you fix this? The court fixes it for them. There's nothing wrong with that. If the person that was treated unlawfully with the DQ date from May 2021 doesn't go to the court, they can't expect the court to give them justice. You can't expect a court to intervene on your behalf if you don't go to the court with your complaint, right? So it's not like a bribe. Courts can only address people before them, okay? So if you are treated unlawfully, you take that case or controversy before a court. If you don't take that case or controversy, you can't complain, hey, the court didn't rescue me. Well, you didn't go to the court, right? Or even gambling. It's more like gambling than a bribe. I would say that, because sometimes lawsuits are successful and sometimes lawsuits are not successful, okay? It's just a fact of life. They accelerate the adjudications of your visa applications or they don't. That's the worst case scenario. They don't. Best case scenario, they do. Okay, I'm unable to join the lawsuit due to a DQ date past the qualification deadline. Can you discuss the impacts of a lawsuit to later DQ dates, RCR1, R1? I would think that there would be indirect benefits to people with the later DQ dates. I talked to a lot of people who were just DQ recently, like in October or September or something, and they're like, oh my gosh, am I going to have to wait 2 or 3 years more? And I'm like, possibly. But here's the deal. As long as someone is challenging the policies in court at Islamabad, the Islamabad policies in court, the government is going to need to explain why we are wrong. And for them to explain why they are wrong, they're going to need to file declarations. They're going to need to shine a light into a dark room and say, oh, this is when all these people were DQ and this is where they are in the process. They can't fight us until when we say, hey, the delay is unreasonable, they can't say it's reasonable without showing like at least some defense on why we're wrong, okay? So when they go to do that, they're going to change some policies. But even if they don't, and all they do is like issue visas to some or all of our plaintiffs, if they accelerate, if they work just a little bit harder than what they're working now, that's going to put you closer up in the queue. So there very well could be indirect benefits to all these applicants. Important to understand, this isn't a old DQ date versus new DQ date thing where you're all enemies with each other, just like it's not a Afghans versus Pakistani visa applicant thing like adversity. No, State Department loves it when individual groups of immigrants decide to adopt that narrative and blame each other, because they're the ones to blame. They could issue visas to Afghans and Pakistanis and adjust the staffing to where there are no ODQ dates because they issued them all visas. They had the power to do that. And since they haven't done that, we fall into these traps of thinking the fault is like, oh, it's us against them, and the them is other immigrants. No. The them is the visa office, the State Department, the people in DC that are causing the problem. Always keep that straight. There are some unlawful policies going on that are causing what's happening in Islamabad. It's not Afghans fleeing the Taliban. It's not people that were in line before you. And you didn't say it was. I didn't mean to imply that that was your question. I just get off on that tangent a lot. Maham says, is it possible to participate if your DQ is after November 2021? No. I want to be able to go into this. I've already wrote most of the complaint, and I have this allegation in here that every visa applicant plaintiff in this case has been DQ'd for over a year. And I want to be able to keep that allegation there. Okay. But yes, it may benefit indirectly or it may not. We don't know. It benefits indirectly 2 different ways that I just discussed. The voice of democracy is heard, Mr. Morrison. Okay. It sounds nice. I'm not sure. I wasn't talking about democracy. I don't know. Maybe I was. Babatune says, I'm not talking about those in Africa, Nigeria under family preferences who are waiting since 2021. That is correct. I'm not talking about that because that's not the subject of today's live, but join me on Wednesday. And I could be talking about that. Lagos is another embassy that has a shameful backlog, and I've recently learned more about that, and maybe there's a group lawsuit for them in the future. Not in this week, though. I mean, our focus right now is the case before us. Would this help other visa categories such as family preferences? This is a difficult question. It may, or it may actually hurt those categories. And let me tell you why. It depends upon how the State Department reacts. If they react by assigning 5 or 10 more consular officers to Islamabad, that's going to help everybody. Okay. Or if they react by removing the requirement that the only consular officers they hire have to be 2nd-year fast officers, that's going to help everybody. Other embassies, they can hire and train a consular officer and they can be assigned to that embassy. But for many of the positions at Islamabad, you have to be experienced for a year first. That requirement is one of the reasons they're unstaffed, see? So if they remove that requirement, or if they found people to go work at this embassy, that's going to help family preference categories too. However, if they choose to respond by just saying, okay, we're going to take care of all the spouses and children of U.S. citizens first, it could actually hurt family preference categories. It's kind of hard to picture them hurting you more than they already are because they're barely issuing family preference categories at all right now. We are challenging that in our Sonny, Wilson, and Santos lawsuits that are before Judge Kogan in the Eastern District of New York, but those lawsuits seem to be stalled a little bit. So we're trying to figure out a way forward for them. Okay. Tala says, you mentioned that there is a possibility that you might not even take it to trial. Oh, more than a possibility. We're not taking it to trial. Trial means a jury. You have a jury when there are issues in dispute as to facts. I don't think the State Department or the plaintiffs disagree about the facts. Everybody agrees how long these delays have been. What we're arguing over is the lawfulness of policies, and judges determine what the law is, not juries. So we will not be going to a trial per se, a jury trial. We may go to summary judgment, but unlikely. And issue visas before that. I should have read your whole sentence, sorry. Does that mean they will try resolving it before the deadline of 60 days to respond? That would be ideal. We've seen them do that before. Mosley versus Pompeo, the case we filed in 2019 for Yemeni plaintiffs, that was settled within the first 60 days. Actually, the Young case was practically settled within the first 60 days. So it's possible. I wouldn't say likely, though. This administration has not adopted the pro-family immigrant policies and platform that we would have expected or would have liked or preferred, right? Secretary Blinken has been Secretary of State now for 2 years, and I've never actually heard him mention the words visas, Bureau of Consular Affairs. He acts like that's not even a part of the State Department. It's really bizarre. It shows you where his values are, right? So I think let's hope that it gets resolved positively in 60 days, but I'm telling you up front, that's not the most likely outcome. A lot of DB 2020-21 questions that can come to our live on Wednesdays. Okay, how do we approach from here if we intend to file a group lawsuit, cost and way forward? If you go to my website, let's see here. I'll help you a little bit. MorrisonUrena.com, on the top bar here says new group lawsuit for Islamabad immigrant visa applicants. I've got a video explaining a little bit about it and the general theory, legal theory that we're using, and some frequently asked questions. My contact information, including Telegram and WhatsApp, and my phone number and my email address. I'm not hiding from you. We have 2 more days and 13 hours to register. And then see where it says register here. This is how you sign up for the lawsuit. You click here, okay? And then it takes you to, let's see if it works. It takes you to a place where you can sign up. That's where I tested it. So, stop screen share. I've already answered this question, Bather. Probably after you asked it, sorry. Would this lawsuit help other visa categories such as family preference? It's unsure. It depends on how State Department reacts or how the judge, what kind of order the judge issues. Eamon says, what's preventing the embassy from putting the plaintiffs in administrative processing out of spite after they issue interviews? Great question, Eamon. 2 things. One, that would be bad faith, which is not lawful, right? The grounds that they refuse a visa, whether it's 212F or 221G, AP, what you're talking about, have to be based on the facts in the case. They can't be based on spite. So that's one thing. It's unlawful. And if you do something unlawful, the time you don't want to do something unlawful is when a judge is watching what you're doing. You know, that's when you could get in a lot of trouble. And also when the government attorneys are watching and when we're watching. And I actually communicate regularly with journalists, so the American public could be watching. The one time you would not want to do a bad faith refusal is when you're dealing with a case that is the subject of a lawsuit. So that's the first reason. The second reason is consular officers are good people. Generally, 99% of them. You don't grow up in the United States and say, I'm going to go work for the State Department in Islamabad or in Kabul or something, unless you are generally a good person and you believe in helping other places. You know, if you want to go fight foreign nationals. You go in the military. You don't. Should have said that. That's not the only reason people go in the military. People go in the military for very good reasons to protect our country. I get that. But what I'm saying is consular officers generally are really good people, and they're not out to spite. Some of them, we've had consular officers recommend people join our lawsuits before. Okay. Hasn't happened recently. We've had consular officers who quit, do declarations that have helped litigation. That happened in when Secretary Pompeo, during the Trump administration, 3 consular officers did a declaration that was used multiple times in litigation. So consular officers are not bad people. Generally, if they're not giving you what you want, it's because their computer's not letting them, or the law is not letting them, because they're bound to follow the law. So what I was getting at is they're not motivated by spite. Vaughn says, how many have joined the lawsuit so far? I got an email on that this morning. I think it's, I've got a lot of emails. Let me see here. 8. 8 have gone through as of now. Plus, there's one family that I'm going to put on that was in the Sunny lawsuit. Was 2, but one of them was scheduled. They naturalized, so they can't be in that lawsuit anymore. So we're putting them on this lawsuit, not charging them more or anything. Oh, thank you, Isabella. We have 8 confirmed plaintiffs with a handful pending registration. What that means is they've started the process but not paid or something like that. Okay. Asher says my DQ is July 2021. So if you're one of these visa categories, then you're eligible to participate. I can't tell you when you will get an interview letter. Sorry. Oh, Ali asked a good question here. Does it help to get a result in our favor if we have a lot of participants? It's a different kind of lawsuit. If you don't have many participants, which is what we're looking at, we might only have 20 or something, the way it's looking right now. It's a lot easier for the State Department to make the case go away, set everybody for interview, and then we're happy. We don't even need to see a judge if everybody gets set for interview. We don't dismiss the case until those interviews happen, of course. But what I'm getting at is there's advantages and disadvantages to a small number of plaintiffs and a large number of plaintiffs. Let's do the extreme on the other side. The Good Luck lawsuit that we filed in 2021 for 11,000 families, over 23,000 plaintiffs. When you bring a lawsuit like that, the judge realizes how serious the problem is. Everybody takes it serious. I think the government probably assigned 10 attorneys to work on it. So when we have a big lawsuit, the advantage is people are taking the problem seriously, which is something that's not happening right now. Backlogs at Islamabad are ignored. I mean, there's some people tweeting about it that are in this community, but that's it. It's not on the news. The American people do not know that there is a immigrant visa backlog in Islamabad. So members of Congress don't know. The White House probably doesn't care. Secretary of State knows. The State Department knows. They caused it. It's just not a priority because they don't even know it's a problem. I would like to someday work, hopefully next year, get started on this, work on helping this community of family-based immigrants, not just to Islamabad, set up some kind of organization to advocate on behalf of themselves and their visa categories before Congress and the White House, because right now I don't believe that's happening like it is for some other visa categories. That's a tangent. But if we get a lot of participants, it will mean we're more likely to get press. We're more likely to get the judge's attention, everybody will understand how important the case is. If we only get one or two, the advantage is it's easier for them to make the case go away. Of course, we've got more than one or two, but you get my point. Sikander asked, what could be the most plausible argument in defense of Islamabad embassy? Nobody's paying me to do that. Government attorneys need to figure that out for themselves. I'm not going to give them clues. Kashif, bring that question, if it's other than the lawsuit, to next Wednesday's Let's Talk Immigration. Unless it's about Islamabad, because I'm all about talking about Islamabad. When you file a group lawsuit for our 5 September 2021 DQ lawsuit, count me in. I'll keep that in mind, but you could always hire us to do an individual lawsuit. They're very effective, especially for immediate relatives. We charge $5,000 for an individual lawsuit. So hit me up directly if you're interested in that. If your DQ is after November 2021, what benefit is as well? Depends on what the State Department does and depends on what the judges do. So you say, how likely is it to benefit us? I don't know what it is yet. I have to wait and see what the State Department does and what the judge does. The lawsuit itself is not the final thing, right? It's just starting this. It's bringing this case or controversy into the sunlight. Right now, it's kind of a secret, and I think it needs to be in the sunlight. And then the way the State Department and the courts react, that's how we will know whether or not it will benefit the plaintiffs and whether or not there will be indirect benefits to non-plaintiffs. Saqib says, after the announcement of the lawsuit, U.S. Embassy Islamabad issued interview letters yesterday in over 20 days. I think that's accurate. However, from the last 2 months, there were no interviews issued. I also think that's accurate. So this is not the first time that an announcement of one of our lawsuits has changed policies or caused the State Department to take actions to try to make the lawsuit less relevant. We've actually decided not to move forward with the lawsuit because of the reactions from State Department. There was a policy last year, 2021, where they would not allow Afghans and assigned to Kabul and Iraqis assigned to Baghdad, their DV applications. They wouldn't let them transfer them to other embassies. It was such a ludicrous policy, but they wouldn't budge on it. So we said, okay, I'm going to sue. And the day I announced the lawsuit, and the day we began onboarding, actually, I think we were onboarding for a couple of days because I collected some plaintiffs and now refunded all their money back. They changed the policy when they realized that we were going to sue. So this is not the first time that they've done that, but at the same time, I don't trust them. So they gave 2 NLs for 20 days. Is that it? Are they going to go a year now with no more 2 NLs? So I think it's a good idea to go ahead and to move forward with this case. But I was happy to see that. Okay, so Kandar asks, is it unlawful to not interview 1+ year pending case, or is it on a compassionate basis? It's a good question. The Administrative Procedures Act says that basically a government benefit, such as an immigration benefit, cannot be unreasonably delayed. The Administrative Procedures Act does not define unreasonably delayed. So what the courts have developed through case law is what's called track factor analysis from this case called Track, telecommunications something. Anyway, it's a lawsuit from a long time ago where the judge issued an order and he said that there are these 6 factors and you have to consider all 6 to determine whether or not a delay is unreasonable. Basically, judges have ran the gamut, have given a variety of orders on what is reasonable and what is unreasonable based on their track factor analysis. And it's not always tied just to the length of the delay. The length of the delay is a factor, definitely, but the hardship that it causes to the plaintiffs and also to the government to fix that balance, that's an important factor. Something called the rule of reason. If there's bad faith, that's definitely a factor, although it's rarely proven. So compassionate basis does get in there into the track factor analysis, but it's not the only thing that matters. Judges can't just say, "Oh, I'm feeling compassion. I'm sympathizing with the plaintiff, so I'm going to rule in their favor." They have to use the law. And there have been orders that say that a 3-year delay, a 3 to 5 year delay, is reasonable. Now, most of those orders are talking about different kinds of delay. Those threads of case law, strings of case law, are going back to delays of people seeking to adjust status or getting an immigration benefit from within the United States, which is quite different from a separated family. So the law is not clear on unreasonable delay, and judges have a little bit of discretion on the way they interpret it, but they have to base it on the facts before them. Stalwart says, have you previously did a lawsuit against the State Department before? Yes. In fact, I've filed over 100. I'm sorry, I shouldn't say that. I have a team, okay? And we have filed over 100 cases this year alone against the State Department. So that's what we do as a law firm. We do handle other kinds of immigration needs. Like we represent people with family-based petitions. We represent them in removal proceedings and asylum and naturalization. However, the primary thing we do in this practice is we sue the State Department. So we have a lot of experience with that. Farid says, hi, Farid. Oh my gosh, I'm almost caught up with questions and we're almost in an hour. Shanawar says, I'm afraid the lawsuit will give the officer an excuse to find a reason to refuse my husband's visa during the interview. Am I overthinking? I don't think you're overthinking, and then that it's important to consider every outcome, right? If you search our YouTube channel for a video called No Retaliation, I explain more about that. But basically, the State Department, the consular officer is not motivated by spite. They're not going to do that. And if they did refuse your husband's visa during the interview because of a reason that wasn't the real reason, they would be breaking the law. They're not going to break the law just out of spite. You know, nobody's motivated to do that. Fun fact, very often our plaintiffs are employees of the U.S. government. Okay, I've had employees who worked at the Department of Homeland Security, CIA, Army, Navy, Marines, state governments who are petitioning for their own relatives, and they realize that the courts are here or there. Nobody's going to be punished in the United States for using the courts. Okay, there's 3 branches of government, and they're all respected, and they're available to people living in the U.S., which includes petitioners specifically. So you don't have to worry about that. Let's just wrap that up there. And I think I can wrap up these last 2 questions. Priority date is January 2021, DQ, August. Okay. Will this lawsuit help us if we go for it? Always. The hope is that it will help, but I can't guarantee that. How long does it take for one else against these lawsuits? Always. That depends upon the outcome of the lawsuit. That depends on how the State Department reacts, and it depends on whether or not the court, if that doesn't work, it also depends on whether or not how the court reacts. So can't guarantee any outcome like that. It's one of these things. Somebody said earlier, gamble. It's a gamble. I think that's fair. But there's no downside, you know. Let me see here. There is a downside in that you may spend the money and not get any value for it. I get that. If it helps get you to live with that decision, we will be there to support you and guide you through consular processing. And we usually charge $2,000 a family a petition for that representation, and you're getting it for $1,500. So there's that added value. And then Junaid says, how many people registered in this club from Pakistan? It's not a club, it's a lawsuit. And there have been 8 families that have registered so far, plus 1 we're putting on from a former case. So it's 9, but I haven't confirmed 7. Okay. Sorry. My staff is correcting me and saying it's 7. But I haven't confirmed that those are all Pakistani. I would need to look at that. There may be a couple Afghans in there too. I don't know. It's all we know is they were. Oh no, my staff is saying all 7 were from Pakistan. Okay, so that answers that question. So okay. I want to thank everybody for coming and listening to my Q&As. If you have a question that wasn't asked or answered here, or if you wanted to talk about it more, I will make myself available this weekend to try to keep up with my Telegram and WhatsApp and email on those issues. So I will not have as much time for phone calls, but I'll try. Okay. But I'm a lot quicker on Telegram and WhatsApp for some reason. And then if you came to this wanting to ask a question about something else, join us on Wednesday for every Wednesday, starting a couple weeks ago. We have something called Let's Talk Immigration, a live stream with me, my law partner, Raphael, if both of us are available, or a member of our team. And this next Wednesday, it'll be Carolina again. She will be back for a second episode. So thank you also, Vaughn. And have a good day. Bye.